Hello, everyone. All three people. Give me a thumbs up or something if you can hear me while we wait for others to come in. Oh, yeah, I'll take that. All right. Thank you, Epic Racer. Hopefully you guys can't hear my furnace running in the background. It's a whopping 12 degrees today. That's not counting the wind chill either. 6 people. Hey, Brooke Pitt, you're here. Hey, I'm glad you're here, Brooke. Later on in this live stream, we're going to talk about camshafts, and I believe you have the ISKI cam in your car. Is that correct? Didn't you do the turbo cycle cam? Did you do the A or the B? And do you have it in your car and running? That's the other question. So I got my cheat sheet here. No, I ended up using the one you sell. Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll go over that later. I have my cheat sheet here of notes of what I wanted to kind of go over today. It's kind of tough going over or coming up with some content for this, being in the winter months over here, because weather's everything's put away. My car's all covered up, and today was one of the coldest days we've had so far, and it's not fun. You can't really do much. Yeah, warm in Florida. I'd love to be in Florida or Texas or anywhere where it's warm. Hey, Brian, you're on. Hey, Brian, shoot me a text or give me a call sometime. I'm curious about the panels for the 80 for the switch or underneath the ashtray there, the block off panel by the console. Jacksonville, Florida. Oh, very nice. Yeah, I've been to Florida a few times, and I want to be able to drive my car year round. That's what I want to do. All right, we got 11 people in here. We're already 3 minutes into it, and let's just get started. And as people come in, great. How's everyone doing for 2021? Got the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you guys so far. Before I get started, I wanted to give a shout out to LSX Hunter on YouTube. He actually contacted me through Facebook and asked, he really liked the dyno day that I had with the last time I was at the dyno with my car, and asked if he could post it on his YouTube channel. He's got some great content. He does a lot with like little tips and tricks on, basically all things automotive, I believe. And he's been doing some stuff with a Pontiac, I believe a 400. He also did this video on LS1 or LS7 lifters in a Pontiac 400 block, which I'll get into later. Oh, there's going to be some discussion on that too. But he reached out to me and wanted to actually kind of promote me on his YouTube channel, which is much appreciated. Did an excellent job. If you get a chance to go out there and check out his YouTube channel, it's LSX Hunter. That's who has it. And he's, like I said, check out his content, give him a thumbs up, and subscribe to his channel, and so on. So just really appreciate him, doing that for us. So we already got people chatting already. Oh, Paul Johnson. What's up, Nick from the Bronx? Oh, Nick. So what's first on the list after the little shout out there? 2021. First things, my lovely wife has updated the website. So if you get a chance to go check it out, we got a few new products that were added, things that I've had that I've sold that was more through word of mouth and if you called. But we got them listed now on the website. All 3 flavors of turbo turbos are available on the website now. They're with the descriptions and the pricing. So we have the standard turbo, your stage 3, and then the stage 5. So all those are on there. I think I'm trying to think what else we changed on there. We added a bunch of stuff, kind of moved some things around. Services is now a separate tab because it was a little hard to find that, we do the carb rebuilding, engine rebuilding. We still have a little bit more work to do. There's a few more things that I wanted to add. Unfortunately, I'm running out of pages that are available through my GoDaddy account. So with the website builder that I have, there's only 50 pages you're allowed or something like that. Well, we've pretty much approached that and maxed it out to where it's hard to add new product to add a page for it. So we're probably going to have to do some combining and so on to fit everything in there. But some of the things that I'm not sure if they're on there right now, but we're going to have engine rebuild kits available, custom made engine rebuild kits. Like, again, I was already selling that stuff to people that had called and asked. But now we're trying to put the word out, make it official, put it on the website itself. The rebuild kits, it'll go from anywhere from just a basic gasket set for the engine, then all the way up to you want a full rebuild with bearings and rings and a cam and pistons and all that stuff. So however you want to build it, again, it's all custom tailored. It's not just some kit that I buy and resell to you. It's actually custom made with the parts that I use for the rebuilds when I do the engine rebuild. So it's all the same stuff inside of it. We have Rick in Arizona. Hey, Rick. LSX Hunter asked who was the best to talk about the 301, and you were referred. Yes, I appreciate that. He said that you did refer me. Thank you so much, Rick. I don't know if I'm really the best, but I guess I have the knowledge, some knowledge. But you definitely have some knowledge too, Rick. There's something there for both of us. We could definitely, the two of us combined can really do a lot and get a lot of information out there and a lot of experience with it. So so website's been updated, trying to come out with new parts, things like that, looking at my cheat sheet. So I guess, with the new year, you have those New Year's resolutions, right? What are your goals for 2021 and everything? So a couple of goals. I've got goals for my car. I've got goals for the business, things like that I'm looking forward to for this year. Goals for my car. Just more testing. I am dying to get to the track. I got to that point where it was like, okay, I got everything sorted out. Let's go back. And it was, that was the last race of the season the weekend prior, and they were pretty much closed for the winter. So it's just a matter of, okay, let's hurry up and get the warm weather so we can get it back open again and get over there. It's supposed to open April 1st. That weekend is when the track is supposed to open. I already got my money saved up for my season pass so that I can go whenever I want and race the car whenever I want. So I'm looking forward to it. First thing out, I want to run it as is right now. Got the boost working correctly. I want to get it out there and just see what it'll run. I'm really hoping for a 14. I think I'll get there pretty easily. It's probably going to be a high 14, but I'm okay with that. And then we'll just start making changes from there. I don't know what order I want to go in yet. As far as modifications and changes, I'm thinking E85 actually right away. I thought about transmission, going 204R and a stall converter. Yeah, that's probably going to help. 342 gear rear end, that's probably going to help too. But rather than doing all that work right away and making large changes like that, I probably could just throw E85 in it and change the tune on the Holly Sniper and see what kind of gains there are from that. So that might be something that happens sooner rather than later. Again, I'm not sure what the order is going to be yet for that. I do want to try a different camshaft, a custom camshaft that I'm working on. We'll get into more detail about that. That's a separate segment about cams. And then as far as the business, obviously, we got the products and stuff that we're always trying to, promote, do new products to come out. I don't really have too much yet for something new. I do want to do some more research and development. I'm thinking maybe trying to make a a scratch built intake manifold for the standard 301 turbo. Based on some flow testing that was done, I think the intake is kind of a restriction. I kind of want to try just scratch building my own intake, but it's not going to be pretty, of course. But just try bigger intake runners. You know, a lot of when you look at the 301 head, you have the small intake port and the large intake port. And I'm wanting to do something where all the intake ports are the large one and all the runners are large, just to see what happens. Is it going to gain? Is it not going to gain? You know, do something kind of on the cheap. I got some ideas of what I want to try. Looking into getting some intake flanges laser cut and actually make it out of steel, because I can weld steel, but I can't weld aluminum. So that's kind of something I'm looking into trying. What else? As far as the business, I definitely want to try to attend more shows this year. Hopefully those shows will be happening. We were very sad to find out that, you know, a lot of the shows got canceled, especially the Trans Am Nationals that we enjoy going to every year in Dayton, Ohio. That was canceled. Hopefully the shows are back on. So far they're scheduled for 2021, and it seems like all the Pontiac shows, local or kind of in my area, they all happen in August. Like almost every weekend in August is a show. Between we have one in McHenry, Illinois, which is not too far from me. It just got moved to McHenry for 2021. The Indian Uprising is what it's called. It's with the Cruisin' Tigers Pontiac Club down in Illinois. They have a show every year, and last year's was not canceled because of COVID. It was actually canceled because the venue, they lost the venue. The venue actually went up for sale and was sold. It was a resort. So they had to cancel the show because the resort was sold. Like they couldn't change venue that fast. It was too close to the show. So they ended up canceling it for that. They do have a new venue. It happens to be a little bit closer to me, which is nice. And so I'm looking forward to doing that one. That's in the beginning of August, I believe. And actually, I think it's right after the Tri-Power Nationals in Ohio. So and I've never gone to the Tri-Power Nationals, and I want to do that one because there's drag racing there, and I'd love to actually take my car and race it down the track with everyone. It's bracket racing, but you know, just think it'd be a lot of fun. So you have Tri-Power Nationals, you have the Indian Uprising, you have then I think there's a week in between where there's a free week right before Trans Am Nationals in Dayton, which is at the end of August, one of the last weekends in August, 24th, somewhere in there, 24th, 5th, something like that. So yeah, August ends up being a very busy month when it comes to this stuff. So I'm hoping I can do that stuff. I know we have Pontiac, Illinois has the Pontiac Oakland Museum down there. I went past it once. I didn't get to actually stop. We were actually going out to St. Louis, but I know they have a car show. Sometimes they have an all Firebird car show, I believe, but I think they have multiple shows throughout the year, Pontiac related. So I'd like to do that one too. You know, bring my car out there. I'd like to road trip my car for as rough as it is. I would like to actually just road trip it, you know, and take it to these places and drive it to these places. So even the Bandit Run, I heard the Bandit Run is going to be on, but there's no details yet as to where they're going or what they're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing if they're somewhat close to me when they're going to do that, because I think that would be fun too. And I think I'm just missing out on a lot of that stuff. I should be out there, you know, and getting in the mix with the rest of the hobby and driving the car and just, you know, having fun with it. So, hi Bruce, how you doing? So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to doing with the business side of it. What else do we have? What else can we talk about? Got some few things here on the list. We'll just go into updates on Rocky, the blue hardtop, 80 turbo hardtop. There's going to be some YouTube videos coming out with it. We did a lot of work on it last month, so there is now boost lights in it. which is there's going to be a YouTube video showing how the boost lights were installed on Rocky with my kit. It's got how the wiring and the switch, where we mounted the switch, which is kind of interesting. That stuff. Then there's going to be another video showing the manual boost controller being installed, measuring boost pressure, and then putting the water alcohol injection kit on it. There's going to be another video. Is there going to be one on that? We put the hood bird on it. We put the decal on it. You may have saw on the Facebook page, I showed the bird, laid out on the hood, like, oh, we're going to do this. And nobody caught it, but it was an 81 hood bird. And the car is an 80. So there's actually a difference between the bird design those 2 years. And luckily I didn't actually put it on. I 6 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and said, oh my God, it's the wrong bird. Looked at the picture in my phone because the car was actually at my cousin's shop. He was helping me with it. And I'm like, oh, wait, the Phoenix Graphics accidentally sent me the wrong one. So had to send it back, get the correct one. They were great about that. There was no problems at all. Got the bird, found out the car had 81 text or lettering for the fenders and the hood scoop and the back rear spoiler. So all that had to come off, and replaced it with the correct 80 stuff. I didn't notice that there was differences. In fact, little secret, maybe it'll be outlined in the video. The 81 lettering on the hood scoop, the 4 is a different font or different shape than where it says 4.9. The 4 is got a sharper angle. It's not as wide at the top in 81, whereas the 80, the 4 is wider at the top, and the spacing between turbo and 4.9 on the scoop is actually farther apart in 80. So a lot of it was just long story. it was quite the thing. You think it's something quick that I'll just zip these off and put the new decals on, and it didn't work out that way. It's currently at the body shop getting some paint touch-up work done, which it's gonna be pretty nice. We got it. I was driving it before the weather turned on us. After putting the boost lights in it and stuff like that, got everything dialed in really nice, timing and carburetor, and was driving it around. It rides like a Cadillac. It's awesome, and it actually just runs so sweet. I mean, just purrs like a kitten. Idles really nice. It's got good pickup. As soon as I get the boost turned up with the water injection, it'll have even more performance. It's got a shift kit in it now, so it's got some nice crisp, firm shifts on the Turbo 350. Sounds amazing with all the exhaust on it, so it's really a cool car. So yeah, more videos of that coming out. What else do we got here? Just looking at people's comments that are coming in. Oh, somebody didn't notice the decals on there between 80 and 81. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Start choking here. So other current projects that I'm working on, this was an interesting one. I got a customer's engine, had a blown head gasket. The engine it has low mileage from a rebuild. I don't know when it was rebuilt. It was done, I want to say sometime around 2004 or 5, and I would say it has like 3,000 miles on it. It's in really good shape, really clean. Still see some crosshatch on the cylinder walls. Oh my gosh, what is wrong today? But it's 40 over, and it's 40 over with cast flat top non-turbo pistons in it, which that's not a big deal. A little more compression, not going to hurt it. But what was interesting was that the roll pins, the dowel pins that hold for the alignment of the main caps, several of them were smashed down into the block. And number 2 main cap had no alignment at all. It was flush with the block. So that cap was basically being centered by the bolts, which doesn't really do that much of a job of centering it. So this engine right now, we're taking the roll pins out. They're going to get reamed and have larger, or not larger, but solid dowels put in it. I've done this before, and now we're actually upgrading to like ARP studs in the mains, things like that. But another interesting fact or part of that is that this engine was running on E85, and the tops of the pistons and the combustion chamber was so clean. I mean, I know it's got low miles on it, but there was like hardly any carbon on the tops of the pistons, and the combustion chambers looked like they just came out of the parts cleaner. And I don't know if that's from the E85 doing that, or if it's just a really clean burning engine, or if it just didn't have a lot of miles, enough miles to actually cause any kind of carbon buildup. But I was pretty impressed when taking it apart, what it looked like. And I kind of want to say that might be the E85 doing that, but we'll see. So yeah, that's kind of what's currently being worked on. Got a couple other engines in process. One of them being 65 over, 65 thousandths over. But it's going to be pretty interesting. Waiting for the weather to warm up this spring, summer. There's going to be a lot of cars getting finished up for customers that are going to be some pretty cool builds. We're going to see what kind of performance we get out of them. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be pretty exciting. Daryl Whiteland's asking, do a 4-speed conversion. I'd love to. I'd love to do a 4-speed conversion. Got a customer in North Carolina that has all the pieces, and he's ordering a flywheel from me, and he's going to be converting his to a 4-speed this year. And that's going to be pretty interesting. I think that'd be a pretty fun car, I think. So should we get into the whole discussion of camshafts? I know we kind of touched on it last time in the last live feed. So I know some of you guys liked it when I got technical, so we can go there again. Camshafts. So I'm thinking of doing a custom ground cam, put out there for you guys. And there'll be a couple different ones depending on what size turbo you're running and the modifications that you have. I've talked to 3 different cam grinders right now, trying to decide which one I want to go with and what specs I want to use. I'm thinking I want to go reverse split. Now, what is reverse split? Most of the time, your off-the-shelf camshafts. How far back do we want to go here as far as explaining it? So you usually have 2 different types of cams when you look at the specs. They have single pattern and dual pattern. Single pattern meaning your intake and exhaust, duration, and lift are the same. Dual pattern meaning intake and exhaust, duration, and lift are different. Most of the time, your off-the-shelf cams end up having more duration and lift on the exhaust side of the exhaust load. And I think the theory or why they do that is I noticed it a lot with the Pontiac cams, the off-the-shelf Pontiac cams, mainly because it seems like the exhaust side flows poorly on the Pontiac heads. So they add more duration, they add more lift to the exhaust side to try to get more scavenging, get the exhaust out, so on. I have this theory that with the amount of back pressure that's before the turbo, the back pressure, the pre-turbo exhaust back pressure, also pressure ratio people talk about, where you have what's the back pressure versus the boost pressure. Because we still have back pressure, that maybe a reverse split cam would be beneficial, meaning that there's more intake, duration, and lift than there is exhaust. And the reason I'm thinking about that is because of how the flow is on the intake side. I think there's some restrictions there. The intake being a restriction, the goofy Siamese intake port, we have small intake valves, all that stuff. So if I'm thinking that if I can give it more time to put air and fuel into the cylinder, even under boost pressure, by increasing the duration and lift on the intake side, that maybe that would make more power. Plus the fact of maybe a little bit bigger cam with the bigger turbo will help out. it's a lot of theory right now, and I'm willing to try it. I want to see what happens. The other side of it too is, duration and lift isn't the only thing that you look at. There's also lobe separation angle. We talked about that when we were live last time, where you look at your lobe, your intake lobe and your exhaust lobes and how close together they are. The closer you get, the more overlap you get. And we talked about overlap being when the exhaust valve, the piston's coming up on the exhaust stroke, we're pushing exhaust out. The intake valve is open. Exhaust valve is open. As the piston's coming up to the top, exhaust valve starts closing. Now we have to start the intake process, because once that piston goes to top dead center on the exhaust stroke, and the minute it starts to travel back down, we're on the intake stroke. So we have to start opening the intake valve. So you get this exhaust valve close, intake valve open situation, and for a short amount of time, both valves are open at the same time. As I talked about before, in a non-turbo application, that overlap event is not, it plays a part in performance, but we're kind of different. We have a restriction in the exhaust side on our cars called the turbo. So the turbo is our restriction, and we start to have this back pressure. And if we have this back pressure in the exhaust system, we don't get this scavenging effect as efficiently as when you have a non-turbo situation. So that overlap event in a non-turbo, where both valves are open at the same time, and you have air coming in, naturally aspirated, coming in, and it kind of starts to go out the exhaust because both that valve is open there, which is fine because it helps carry some of the exhaust gases out of the cylinder. And they call it scavenging, or there's probably other terms of it too. So you're using that fresh air intake to actually kind of push the exhaust out. Well, because we have this restriction with the turbo and there's pressure there, you don't quite have that scavenging going on there. And if you have the back pressure high enough, you actually have the opposite, where it's starting to stay in the cylinder. That's where this whole pressure ratio comes in. If I have how much back pressure do I have in the exhaust versus boost pressure coming in on the intake side? And if you have a 2-to-1 pressure ratio, where I have 10 psi boost coming in on the intake side, but I have 20 psi, 2 times as much in the exhaust side, which one's going to win? Well, the exhaust side is going to kind of stay there. It's not going to get pushed out, not as efficiently anyway. So you have to watch that overlap. That's where everybody, a lot of the high pressure ratio turbo systems, everybody's concerned about overlap. So what they're trying to do is minimize that overlap to where the both valves aren't open for so long at the same time. Well, how do you get rid of overlap? So if our lobe separation angle that we talked about, if it's tight, that's more overlap. But if the duration is not very big on the cam, the duration plays a part in the overlap number. So you end up, if you have a small cam with small duration, well, the small duration tends to give you less overlap. And then the lobe separation could play a part in that overlap. Well, if you start increasing the duration, obviously you start gaining overlap. So you can spread the lobe separation angle farther out to kind of reduce that. So a lot of times you hear general turbo stuff, talk about camshafts where they'll say, well, you want to be on a 114 lobe separation angle, spread that lobe separation angle out, get that overlap down really low so that you don't have this problem where exhaust is stacking up and going back into, or staying in the cylinder. Plus wide lobe separation angle. I've been doing a lot of research on this and a lot of reading online and, videos, Engine Masters, stuff like that. When you spread out that lobe separation angle, you actually get better engine vacuum at idle. Because the only thing is that you don't get is you start to lose that choppy idle, that hot rod idle that everybody likes. That starts to go away when you start increasing the lobe separation angle and reducing the overlap. All that noise that you hear at idle and that choppy idle and stuff like that, that's from overlap. So there's a lot more involved with it too. But I I keep looking into what specs I want to go with. I have numbers that I want to try as far as duration, and I'm not too concerned about the lift. Mainly, I want the lift to be under 500, probably somewhere at the most in the 460-ish range for lift, because you won't have to machine the heads and the valve guide bosses to do that. Stock heads should be able. I got 467 lift in my car right now because of my 165 rockers on the comp cam that's in it, and I don't have a problem with the retainers hitting the valve guide. So if I can keep it at that, so that no additional machine work is required, that basically the cam would work, that's what I'd like to go with. So we'll see where it goes. If it makes more power, we'll look into a roller version of it, also a roller cam version. I'd also like to look into a smaller version of that cam for people with stock turbos or close to stock turbos. I'm looking at these cam specs for my car or my customers that have stage 5 turbos, which is kind of a different ball game, less back pressure, kind of changes things up a little bit. So that's kind of that's the majority of my time has been spent doing that, just looking into all these different cam specs and what other people have used, not necessarily in a Pontiac, but what people have used. One of them, for example, is the Ford 302, the old school pushrod 302, 5-liter Mustang Fox body days. A lot of people would ask about that. Oh, if I put a turbo on my stock 5-liter, what kind of cam should I run? Should I run a turbo cam, this and that? And like, hands down, everybody's like, stock fuel injection cam, just the stock, 87 to 93 EFI cam that came with from the factory. You'll make 500 horsepower with that cam and you'll split the block. So I started looking at what a stock 5-liter cam looked like. And it was interesting. They got a really wide lobe separation angle. They got it at their ground at like around 115 and a half, 116, depending on who measures it. And that's really wide. But the key is, the reason they went with that wide lobe separation angle is they wanted good, steady, high engine vacuum at idle and everything, because it's fuel injected. And when you're fuel injected, your map sensor is what's one of the crucial sensors to help with the fuel injection and calculating how much fuel to give the engine, because that map sensor is basically the engine load. The map sensor is reading engine vacuum. Vacuum goes away when you're under load. That's what it's using as an input. So if you got this nasty, lumpy, high overlap, high duration camshaft in a fuel injected car, that map sensor is just getting this bouncing vacuum reading, and it's like trying to compensate and add fuel for it. And it doesn't like it. It gets very upset at that. And being that my car's got a Holly Sniper on it, I don't want a real erratic idle. As much as I would like to have that sound, I need it to be, on the conservative side and actually play well with the fuel injection. So I might do something in the range of the stock 5-liter cam, but more technical stuff. When I tried looking at LS cams and what those guys are using as far as like specific turbo cams for the LSs. I don't think I can go off of that, because it's not so much the cam that's the key. It's really comes down to how big is the turbo and how well do your heads flow when it comes to any engine. And the LSs flow really well. Their cylinder heads flow really well. And when you got cylinder heads that flow really well, you don't need a very, very big cam. You don't need a lot of duration. So their cams look somewhat small for what they are, but it's because their heads flow really well. Okay, well, what does that mean for me? I don't think our heads flow very well, but I can't really put a really big cam in it either. So got an idea of where I want to go with it. Like I said, it's probably going to be a reverse split. It's probably going to have more intake duration and lift than it does exhaust. Lobe separation is probably going to be spread out. And I'm really wanting to try it, but got to get to the track first. I want to see what my car does right now as it sits with the comp cam 252H that's in it. How far can we take that first? And then we'll just make changes from there. But all right, enough rambling from me. I got 16 people watching right now. I've already spent half the time talking. What do you guys have for questions? What do you want to talk about? What do you guys got going on for projects? How's your car going? What are your goals for 2021 as far as your car? Um, Reach out to me, I guess. And if there's anything else I can think of, I'll bring it up too. But feel free to start a discussion, if you will. I'm gonna look over my notes again too. Oh, Brook Pit. Wouldn't the split be different with headers than manifolds? It's a good question. Although my headers did show an increase in torque when tested on an engine dyno, I don't know how much of a restriction there is in the manifolds from the factory. Now, here's an interesting thing, something to think about. When you look at the stock manifolds on our cars, the exhaust manifolds, we take all the exhaust from the driver's side, go under the oil pan with the crossover pipe, and then we go into the passenger side manifold. Obviously, everything's collected there. All the exhaust is collected in the passenger side manifold before it's fed with a single pipe to the turbo. I always found it interesting that the inlet on the passenger side, where the crossover pipe was coming in, was right at number 8 cylinder, at the exhaust port of number 8. Is that hurting anything? I don't know. I was always fearful that the exhaust was coming up there, and then if the exhaust valve opened on number 8, I don't know if it really made a difference or not. I compare that with my headers. My headers have pipe that comes together from both sides of the engine, and they merge together in a Y on the passenger side of the oil pan. So to me, that might be a little more beneficial. But then again, if we're talking about back pressure, I mean, pressure's everywhere. So it's like, does it really matter at that point? It's just going to be, if you're going to have back pressure in the system, it's going to be everywhere. So I don't know if the cam would make a difference with the headers or not. Honestly, I think that where the cam might make a difference is the turbo itself, because the turbo is the restriction. Well, the main restriction, the first restriction. So if you have a bigger turbine wheel, turbine housing, free up the turbine side to reduce that back pressure, I think that's more it affects the camshaft more than manifolds versus headers. Now, manifolds versus headers on the same turbo, like a stage 5, the large turbo, well, that could be interesting. that could be interesting. I don't know. Maybe it would make a difference if you ran manifolds or not. Something to definitely think about. I wish I could spend a month on a dyno and just swap parts out and see what works and what doesn't. That would be pretty interesting. We got Rick. Yeah, ease of manufacturing is basically why they did it with the manifolds. Definitely. I see a lot, of turbocharging and stuff, and obviously, anytime you try to look up something about a custom turbo kit, 9 out of 10 of them are always an LS LS engine. Okay, fine. But from some of the things that I've seen online, especially like Matt Happel with Sloppy Mechanics, I mean, that guy is like the LS turbo guy. He kind of mentions that the hot side really isn't all that critical. He's made some pretty nasty, weird looking configured hot sides feeding the turbo, and it didn't care. It still made power. So I don't know. Is that true for all of them? For all turbos? I mean, I'm sure you can get to a point where it is a restriction. But what else do we have for people asking questions? Is the Turbo 350 unique for 8081 turbo cars? Unique in what way? Honestly, no, I don't think it is. The only difference I know of is that the 81 has a lockup torque converter. If it's a US spec car that has the computer controlling the fuel and the timing, it has a lockup torque converter. So the lockup torque converter turbo 350s have a different input shaft actually for the lockup feature. So you can't put a standard torque converter in a lockup transmission. But anything unique about them? No, they have Buick's Pontiac bell housing pattern. There's no difference in gear ratios. There was something mentioned, I think it was on the forum years ago, that they had a different first gear in the Turbo 350, but that's not true. Not that I know of. I mean, all the Turbo 350s are 252 or 2.52 first gear ratio. I think where that came about was that if you had a 301 with a non-turbo, you got the metric 200 transmission, which was a 3-speed. It was like a lightweight, light duty 3-speed, physically the same size as the Turbo 350. But the metric 200 had a lower first gear. It had a 274 first gear. So maybe there was some misinformation. Maybe there was a brochure or something that mentioned that, oh, with the 301, you have this lower first gear ratio. But that was the metric trans that did that. Richard, never understood this. Why did Pontiac go the route with blow-through and carb in 1980? Volvo, Saab, and others had blow-through turbo and mechanical Bosch injection at the time with an intercooler. I think you mean draw-through. Well, we call it draw-through. We call ours a draw-through turbo because you're drawing the air and fuel mixture into the turbo. You're talking blow-through with an intercooler, like you mentioned, the Saab, the Volvo, things like that. Man, that's a tough question. There's so many different things or different possible reasons. I'm not going to claim that I know the reasons why, but I think the whole draw-through thing. Well, number one, I know that the draw-through turbo setup for the 301 was actually borrowed from the Buick. Buick was doing it in '78 with the 3.8 liter V6. They borrowed that design and tried it on the 301, and that's why it was there. So kind of a deal where most of the engineering work was already done by Buick. So they kind of made some changes as far as the size of the turbo and even the castings are different. So don't get confused. A Buick turbo is not the same as the 301 turbo. There's some people out there that are claiming Buick turbos as 301 turbos, and they are not. Even the plenum and the mounting of the compressor housing where the 3 bolts mount to the intake is different. But like I said, I think it was just the whole save time on engineering, production costs. The turbocharging was still kind of new to the U.S. market and the engineers in the States with GM and Ford and Chrysler had it down pretty good by 87. Yeah, 87. They started doing the blow through intercooled little 4-cylinder Dodges. Some things cruise pretty good. I like those cars. But yeah, that's kind of where it ended up. I mean, if you think about it, Buick didn't go blow through until 86 on the Grand National. Prior to that, it was still draw through in 84 and 85, but it was fuel injected. Good question, though. Thank you. Oh, what was the other question there, Richard? And could the 301T be converted to blow through? Good question. Let's talk about that. Actually, I didn't even have that on my list, but I thought of it. One of the things that I might want to try, and it might not be for 2021 though, can it be converted to blow through? I'm going to answer yes, but not very easily. The idea that I have for going blow through on a 301 turbo is 4-barrel intake manifold, which I have one behind me actually. 4-barrel intake manifold. You'll have to remote mount the turbo off the engine. In fact, at that point, different turbo. Don't even try to use the turbo that's on the car. You could, but odds are trying to clock it correctly and get everything adapted and working, it probably wouldn't work. Just go get a different one. There's a lot of cheap turbos out there, which I wouldn't mind trying one, and some people have had good success with them. Find something that is sized correctly. Then we can go with an intercooler and blow through. I would highly recommend fuel injection, a throttle body. I would not try to blow through a carburetor, especially a quadrijet. I would not try to blow through a quadrijet. But I would say like Holly Sniper or a Phytech, that's a power adder Phytech that's set up for boost. A Holly Sniper, which is good to 22.5 pounds of boost, I believe. Mount that on the 4-barrel intake, put a pressure hat on it. Spectre makes one. It's the air cleaner that I have on my car right now. Do it up that way. I think you can convert it to blow through. It's something I want to try because I think we can get a little more power out of it with the denser air charge with the intercooler. If we can get the temps down, we're going to make more power. Having that remote mounted turbo, not so much the location of it, just the fact that it have an aftermarket turbo that could have an even better, less restricted turbine housing. I think we can make some more power that way. But that's a good question. It's something I've always been wanting to try. But my customers, some of my customers out there, they like to keep it looking original. So you're not going to look original if you go blow through. If you're looking for performance and you don't care about how it looks, yeah, that would be a cool way to go. So good question, though. Thank you for bringing that up. Brian, I got my 81 TTA a few weeks ago, 45,000 miles. Mint, I'm glad you go over all this stuff since I'm new. Welcome aboard, Brian. Congratulations on getting your car. We'll make sure that you can have some fun with it. Rick, I'll just say Rick P. I don't want to try to annihilate your last name. Dump your exhaust out the fender vent. You'll lose 150 pounds of BS under your car. It'll flow. I want to take it one step farther. I want to make the hater pipe out the hood. Maybe a little tractor flap on top. I don't know. If I found a flat, basic Firebird hood with no scoop on it for free, pretty much, I would do it. I would cut a hole in that thing and I would mount it on my car just for the heck of it. But, just having fun. Thanks for that. William, how would you suggest testing a knock sensor and a PEVR? Good question, William. So the knock sensor, there is actually a procedure. There's a resistance measurement in the factory service manual for the knock sensor. You basically, you know what? I might have one. Hold on. Aha, I do. Okay, knock sensor. Single terminal right there. Threaded in here. 1980, this thing is in the intake manifold. 1981, it is back in the block by the distributor, but they are the same knock sensor. There's no difference between the 2 years. You take your voltmeter or your ohm meter to measure resistance. You put it on the stud and on the threads and measure resistance. It's very low resistance value. I want to say I think the book said 325 to 375 ohms is the resistance value. If you do not have that, it's junk. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't buy them new, so you're stuck trying to find a used one if you even try to hook it up. Now, is it needed? Is it required? I'm putting it out here right now because a lot of people like to say this, that, oh my God, you need the knock sensor. The turbo won't work. The car won't run right. You're gonna blow it up if you don't have the knock sensor. No. You don't want this to work. You don't want this thing getting involved. You want to run the best that you can, the most boost you can without detonation. If you get into detonation and you have to retard the timing because of detonation, you're losing power. Now, I'm not saying, well, run it with detonation, you won't lose power. No, you're still going to have problems. You're going to start destroying stuff, but you're also going to, even that's not the best performance either. So I always say, don't get hung up on this too much. It's best to tune and get the car running good to where this isn't required. And there's ways of doing that. So that's talking about the knock sensor. Now, you mentioned testing the power enrichment valve. Do I have one of those? Yes, I do. Hold on. It's nasty looking. Power enrichment valve with a broken fitting. How can you test this? Well, the best way to test it is with a vacuum pump. And you hook the hose to the center port and you plug off this port and you pump it up with vacuum and you see if it holds. If it does not hold, that means the diaphragm ruptured to the bottom side. Send it in to me and you get it rebuilt. This one, I don't know if you can hear that. Sounds like a maraca. Obviously, there's something bad inside of it. I haven't taken it apart yet. There's the other way you can test is if it's on the car and the car is running and you take your 2 hoses off the top here, put your finger over these 2 ports. If you feel vacuum sucking in your fingers, it's bad because you're getting vacuum from the bottom side and you're not supposed to. Now, I have had several of these that the vacuum diaphragm inside was stuck to the bottom. So you can do the vacuum test. Hey, it holds vacuum. Hey, I don't feel vacuum over the top of it when the engine's running. Yeah, until you try to put boost pressure in the bottom side and it doesn't lift the diaphragm off, and then it's stuck. So I've seen a lot of them that get glued down, but really 99% of the time the diaphragm is ruptured, it's broken, it's destroyed from heat and fuel vapors, because when you're building boost pressure, just fuel mixed in with the air. I've seen them full of what looks to be STP oil additive. I mean, there's just super thick oil inside of them. I've seen them all dried out and rattling. It's just amazing how many different ways this thing can fail. But odds are, if it hasn't been rebuilt, it needs to be rebuilt. I mean, unless you got some super low mile car. I mean, 45,000 mile, it's still 40 years old. Odds are it's probably bad. Send it in to me. We'll get it rebuilt for you. But thank you for the question. Brian D, need to find a local guy who is well versed in these engines. Brian, where are you located? Are you anywhere close to Southeast Wisconsin? Because I kind of know a guy. Lee, 84 Dodge 2.2 Daytona Turbo. Yes, those are the first years. Those were actually draw through. They were fuel injected, but they were draw through turbo. 84 5. Well, yeah, 86. Shelby started doing blow through somewhere around 86. And then Chrysler finally did it. I know Chrysler did it in 87 on the Shelby Z Daytona because I had a couple of those. Daryl, can the bottom ends hold up to your conversions? So far, so good. Actually, I'll refer to Rick in Arizona who drag races his car, and Rick has not scattered the bottom end of it. I have not scattered the bottom end of it. Rick has stated he has twisted a couple blocks, and he runs, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong if you're still on, a factory stock class in drag racing. I don't know which letter code it is for his class, but he's got some restrictions as to what he's allowed to modify and what he's not allowed to modify. And his car damn near runs 11s, very close. He's run low 12s with it, and it's held up just fine. Like I said, he's twisted a few blocks and got him a little out of square, but never broke a stock crank. He never broke a stock rod, as far as I know. Rick, again, correct me if I'm wrong. But honestly, when it comes to, in my opinion, when it comes to the strength of the lower end, and a lot of people are like, oh, the crank is weak and the rods are weak and this is weak and whatever. I think it all comes down to the tune. I understand people have poked rods out of the oil pans with these cars. Honestly, it's probably because, number one, detonation. They were probably hitting some very hard detonation and never got out of the gas and just stayed in it the whole time while it was doing it. That will destroy any engine. The other side of it is over too much RPM. Why are you revving it past where it's making power? There's just no point to it. That a stock 301 turbo is pretty much done at 4,500 RPM. You don't need to try to go to 6,000. I think that's the other side of it. A lot of people claim that going back to the Fox body Mustang push rod 5 liters, you put boost to it. The minute you make 500 horsepower, you're going to split the block in half. People have gone more than 500 horsepower and not split the block in half. It's all in the tune, I believe. So as long as you got a good tune going on and everything, I haven't had a problem. Customers haven't had a problem. I've had them on chassis dynos. I've had them on engine dynos. I've made 500 foot-pounds of torque with one of them at like 3,000 RPM or a little bit over 3,000 RPM, and it hasn't scattered the bottom end. So that's my theory on it, but thank you for the question. Good timing. Yes, good time. William is saying, having good timing is, key. Rick, thank you. Rick states, crank isn't weak. I agree. Do you sell test pipe for the catalytic converter replacement? Good question. Interesting thing. I had a car come in. Oh, what car was it? Can't remember now. One of my customers' cars came in for my exhaust system to be installed, and the catalytic converter had a test pipe. Now, for those that don't know, back in the day when converters first started coming out, exhaust manufacturers, aftermarket exhaust manufacturers like Walker and stuff like that, they would actually make a pipe, what they call a test pipe. And what it was for was to unbolt your catalytic converter, put this pipe in place, see if your car runs better in case you have a plugged catalytic converter. So it was to test whether or not your converter was bad or plugged. Obviously, those went away then because people were just leaving them in there. The one car that I worked on actually had one of these test pipes. I saved it. I don't know if I'm going to reproduce it because here's why. Car's 40 years old. Most of them, either the cat's already been removed or it's been replaced. And the factory catalytic converter on these cars had a 4-bolt flange at the back where the Y pipe attached. I call it the Y pipe, the piece that was between the cat and the mufflers. That was a 4-bolt flange. In front of it was just slip fit, a joint. So I could make it, but I don't. Majority of the cars out there, that 4-bolt flange was cut off a long time ago, and an aftermarket cat was welded in place, or an exhaust shop fabricated a test pipe and put it on there. So I have one. If you have a car with a factory Y pipe and factory cat that you want to eliminate it, I'll sell you this test pipe that I have. But as far as me producing one, it's probably not beneficial. When I sell my exhaust system, I can provide piping to eliminate the cat for my exhaust. But if that answers your question, but thank you. Yeah, Rick is stating yes, the block is probably the weaker link. Even to that point, though, I think the block can withstand some power. But yeah, I had another customer asking me about. He's doing like this crazy build. He's got Kaufman heads, aluminum heads that he's going to put on, and a custom intake, and on a 301 turbo block. And his builder is trying to convince him to stroke it with like a 400 crank or even an aftermarket stroker crank. And they're like, oh, if we use a forged crank, we can do much higher RPM, like 7,000 RPM. I'm like, wow, I don't think the block is going to hold that. Let's see. I'm just going to say F649. If I replaced the catalytic converter with the test pipe on the 81 with the check, will the check engine light come on? Great question. No. The 81 cars with their computers, the computer is dumb. The computer is not smart. It's not like today's cars. Really, the only thing that pops the check engine light on an 81 is it's more watching on the input side of sensors. So if your oxygen sensor is not reading correctly, if your throttle position sensor is not reading, your mixture control solenoid's unplugged, coolant temp is not coming up. What else? Those types of sensors will make a check engine light come on. The solenoids that are turned on and off, like your purge solenoid, your EGR solenoid, your air management valve solenoids on the back of the air pump, those are turned on by the computer's just grounding the solenoid. The solenoid always has key on power. And then when it's commanded from the ECM to turn on those emission solenoids and stuff, the computer's just turning on the ground. And the computer's just like, yep, I turned it on. It could be unplugged and it doesn't even know it. So there's no feedback on some of those sensors like there are in today's cars. We don't have a rear oxygen sensor to make sure that the catalytic converter is working. It's so old school. So no, taking out the cat, you're not going to have a problem. Your 81, though, there is a difference in the air management system with the air pump. So not only are you putting air into the front of the cylinder heads, there's a not a third pipe, but a second pipe going down underneath the car next to the oil pan that goes to the catalytic converter in 81. So my test pipe does not have that hookup. So that's going to be the next trick, is either you block it off, you remove it, or you do tap into that pipe somehow. But great question. Thank you. What else do we have? Any testing with nitrous sprayed after the impeller on pressure switch before the boost starts up? William. Nitrous, I'm assuming you're saying as in like a anti-lag, like to fog nitrous in before boost comes on. I do have a kit for that it would be used like an anti-lag. It's about you can adjust it, but I'm thinking like a 50 horsepower shot. Spray nitrous in. When boost pressure comes up, it'll actually turn off the nitrous. I have not experimented with it. Maybe that should be a 2021 thing. I don't know. Test that out on my car, but I have not tested it. I sold 2 kits for as long as I've been in business. One person, I don't know if they ever filled the bottle. The other person, I don't know if he has it installed yet. That was last year that I sold it to him. But it's something we can definitely try and do. Maybe I will experiment with that on my car. Rick, NHRA stock eliminator is the class. Thank you, Rick. Twisted several blocks and the cranks are just fine. There you go. From the man himself, who has probably put more abuse through a 301 than I have. Yes, you will twist up a block, but the cranks don't give up if you got the right tune and the right tolerances. Great questions, guys. And this is good. I don't mind repeating myself on some stuff, even though if we discussed it before, because as you can see, we do have some new people, some new owners. I've been getting a lot of calls on people that have just recently purchased their first turbo Trans Am, which is good to see. It's good to see that more people are starting to accept these cars other than boat anchors. I think that's what I'm going to name my car, is the boat anchor. Brooke Pitt, nitrous will fix your 60-foot times. Yeah, I probably would. The one thing I'm a little nervous about doing the nitrous, they always say you shouldn't have it come on until a higher RPM, because you could do damage to the rotating assembly, like knock the connecting rods out of it. Trying to hit nitrous at a low RPM. But I'm wondering if that's like people that are shooting 150 horsepower shots of nitrous. Yeah, I can see where you probably want to have some RPM in it and do it that way. I mean, it's usually on a wide open throttle switch, so that when it does go wide open, then the nitrous comes on. Obviously, you don't want to be hitting nitrous, at not at part throttle or anything. But I'm thinking with a smaller shot, the 50 horsepower shot, that you can hit it at a lower RPM and not, because it's a torque multiplier just like the turbo. So even the Gen 3 LS guys have to watch how much torque they're making at low RPM, because they'll bend connecting rods. So I know for the movie Smokey and the Bandit, the sequel, when they had the turbo car, they needed the turbo car to be able to spin the tires from a dead stop. So they were using nitrous, kind of the same thing. They were just giving it a quick hit of, 50 horsepower shot or whatever, right off the bat, get the tires spinning. That's kind of how I thought of it. There was a magazine article that showed that nitrous kit being installed. So I was like, well, this doesn't look all that hard. I just hooked it up so that the turbo boost pressure turned it off, so that you weren't, not that you can't run nitrous with the boost pressure, nitrous and turbo. Well, maybe that could be interesting. Leave it on. Hey, Brent, how you doing? Haven't talked to you in a while. Hope everything's well by you. William, I bought my 80 new. One mod I did way back was 165 rockers. Yeah, okay. I sell 165s for it too, but did only the exhaust. You know what? I've heard of that with the Pontiac guys, that they would only do the exhaust side for the 165s. Again, like we talked about with the camshaft stuff, I think that was mainly because of the poor flowing exhaust with the cylinder heads of conventional Pontiacs, that they would put a bigger rocker arm on the exhaust side. To when you go larger rocker arms, all you're doing is changing the lift. So, like for instance, the comp cam in my car is a single pattern cam. It's 206 duration. That's at 50 thousandths duration, not advertised. Advertised is 252, hence 252H cam. So it's 206 on the intake and exhaust, and then it's 425 thousandths valve lift intake exhaust. But that's what a 1:5 ratio rocker arm, which is stock. I put 165s on my car, so that bumped the lift value from 0.425 to 0.467 now. It does change duration a small amount, but it's not much. But yeah, I have heard of that. I don't know how well that would work in a stock application turbo 301. Again, we're dealing with back pressure. Odds are it really doesn't make a difference, is my guess. Maybe, like I said, stock turbo, maybe even stock exhaust, there's so much back pressure going on that I don't know if you would notice a difference in performance especially with just on the exhaust side, not the intake. But thank you for that. That was an interesting part of it. Rick in Arizona, Buick guys did the nitrous and turbo to get the spool quicker. Yeah, yeah, that definitely. Oh, that's why I was saying anti-lag. Hitting it with the nitrous, you will develop a lot more exhaust velocity. And if you have a really big turbo, big turbine wheel or housing or something, it's hard to get it into boost. So by throwing nitrous at it, getting a lot more exhaust velocity going, spins the turbo up faster. Plus, when you inject it pre-turbo, the nitrous is coming in so cold that it'll actually drop the intake temps, which could be beneficial too. I'm going to touch on that a little bit too about the whole turbine thing in a second here. Maybe next time we'll do a happy hour or something. Turbine housing, turbine wheel, that side, the exhaust side of the turbo itself. A lot of people, I had somebody comment in one of my YouTube videos. He's like, if you still have, 1.5, if your pressure ratio is still 1.5 or whatever, he says you still have too much back pressure. Well, I understand where you're coming from, because ideally you'd want to be 1-to-1, like naturally aspirated, but building boost. The problem is that in order to get rid of that restriction, that back pressure, you have to start upsizing the exhaust side of the turbo. Well, when you start doing that, it requires more exhaust velocity to actually get it to spin to make boost. So you end up with more lag most times. Now you can try to compensate with the camshaft and start playing with your overlaps and things like that again to try to get more exhaust, energy into the turbo to get it to spool up. But that's the trade-off. Some of these LS guys, they go with these really big turbos, and that's why they're making 6, 7, 800 horsepower with those things, because they're running all kinds of boost, but they don't have a lot of back pressure, but they're also not making boost till 4,000 RPM. Being a street car and things of that nature, it's like, well, I kind of need a little bit of back pressure there, or not, I don't want to say back pressure. We're going to call it, what was the term that the guy at the machine shop said? Turbo drive pressure. We need a little bit of turbo drive pressure to get things lit up. I want stuff to kind of come in a little bit sooner, just because you're on the street. Sometimes you just don't have enough runway to get things spooled up and excited. Let's see. Oh, William, can you spool up before the launch? Right now, I can't. Interesting thing. It depends on the torque converter stall speed. If you can do that or not. Now, take into consideration at what point does the turbo start to build boost RPM wise. RPM wise, depending on the size of the turbo that's on it, like my car doesn't start building boost till 2,500 RPM, and again, you got to be at wide open throttle. You got to have a load on the engine, not just revving it, with no load on it. It won't build boost that way. I'll do, right around 2,500 with my stage 5 turbo. I'll start to get into boost, 2, 3, 4 pounds of boost. I think it's pretty much all in just before $3,000, just before 3,000 RPM. So can you build boost with your foot on the brake and on the gas? Well, a stock torque converter for these cars is stalling somewhere around 1,800 RPM, 1,600 RPM is low. So you get to this point where the RPM is coming up, but you're going to get to a point where now it's just going to want to drive the car. You're going to want to drive through the brakes, and things of that nature. So can you build boost on the line? No, not really. You'd have to have probably a pretty high stall converter, depending on your turbo, to actually get into the RPM range where you start to make boost number one. But then you run into the thing where it's called, some people call it lockup, not to be confused with a lockup torque converter. But basically you've gone beyond the stall speed to the point that you're coupling and you're just trying to drive the transmission at that point. I try to build boost holding my foot on the brake as much as I can, but I pretty much start driving through the brakes, and I can't hold the car back enough to do it, to get the RPM high enough. A stall converter would get you closer. You get like a, I'd like to put a 2200 RPM stall in my car. I've done a 2400 stall. 2400 is not bad. It could be a little annoying on the street because the car won't actually really start to move until you give it some gas, so that you feel the RPM coming up and then the car starts to move, almost like you're riding a clutch on a stick shift car. It can get kind of annoying sometimes. Richard, do you have any experience with a 204R in the 8081 turbo? Yes, quite a bit. I have one waiting for my car. I have installed it in two customers' cars, at least. I know one for sure. Brian, you have one. There is one in another customer's car, and I'm going to be installing one in my current customer's car that I have. So yes, I have experience with it. I think it's an excellent modification. Gear ratios are great. Like I mentioned before, the old metric 200 that had the 274 first gear, that's what's in the 204R. 274 first gear, so it's a little bit lower than turbo 350. So that gives you a little more gear taking off. They bolt in. They have the same overall length as the turbo 350, so the drive shaft does not change. I like to use the Summit Racing a transmission cross member for it. It bolts right into place. Just drill the holes in your frame one size bigger because they give you bigger bolts. But that is a beautiful piece. Mounts right in there, no problem. The 204R is a dual bolt pattern case, so it has Buick's Pontiac bell housing pattern and Chevy bell housing pattern. So it bolts right to the Pontiac block. The torque converter bolts up to the Pontiac flywheel with no problem. Flex plate, whatever. Great addition. I use a TCI adjustable universal throttle valve cable. That is critical. You've got to have that throttle valve cable hooked up correctly and the geometry correct on the linkage of your carburetor, because that is what controls the line pressure in the transmission, your shift points. You don't have that hooked up correctly, you could potentially smoke a transmission, a 204R. So very critical. If you do it, make sure that you get that right, get that adjustment right. But I really like it, especially coupled with 342 gears in the rear end. Great performance. Overdrive is phenomenal. It's great to have. I am really looking forward to doing it on my car, especially if I plan on taking it on any kind of cruises or doing a bandit run. It'd be great to have my 204R in it. But yeah, I've done it. If you are interested in doing that with your car and you need more information, just drop me an email or whatever. I'll tell you all the parts that I use, even who I use for rebuild kits, so on. So great question. Thank you. Will, you're experiencing the same thing with the whole torque converter or trying to hold the brake. Rick, I launch at 3,400 and 8 PSI. Oh, very nice. That's why it picks up the front wheel, Rick. Yeah, 3,400. Wow. That's pretty good. I mean, that's what kind of is that what's your stall speed on your converter? Is it a 4,000 stall or I'd be curious, huh? 3,400. Because I'm assuming you're launching. Are you launching under your stall speed? Okay. William, what converter with 204R? I would recommend a 2200 stall with the lockup feature. I buy my kit from TTA Performance out in New York. I buy their kit, full kit, and torque converter from them. And like I said, 2200 stall. Stall converters are hard to gauge because the more torque the engine makes, the higher the stall speed is, it seems like. So, like I said, for the street, 2200 usually is pretty good. Like I said, 2400, you get a little annoying stop and go traffic. Rick, I can still drive it to the car show. Huh? I wouldn't doubt that. Any other questions? Oh, we've already been in an hour and 15 minutes. Man, I thought I was going to be short on material this one. Apparently not. And Andy Wright. Did some pace cars come with 323s instead of 308s? No. There was no option for a different rear gear ratio on any of the turbo cars. So let's dive into that just a little bit. Standard equipment on 80 and 81 301 turbo cars. They all have air conditioning. They all are automatic transmissions. They all have air pump emissions on them. and they all have 308 rear gears, and they all came with a 225/70/15 tire, which is about 27 inches tall. So no, none of them came with a different rear gear ratio in them. The car that paced the Indy 500 in 1980, the actual pace car that is in the Indy 500 Hall of Fame Museum, whatever, in Indianapolis, the car that was used on the track had the air conditioning removed, had the tires shaved, meaning that, took the tread down, so that it wasn't all squishy at high speeds, and actually had 256 rear gears put in it to maintain a higher speed. But no, none of them came. There was no option for a different rear gear ratio. What do you mean their kit? Lockup kit or rebuild kit? Rebuild kit, Lee. CK Performance is who I go through right now for the rebuilt kits for the 204R. They have some nice kits available with upgrades, like putting a Grand National style servo for second gear. Their clutch packs. They even have an option where you machine the drum down and you can add extra clutches. There's some heavier duty parts. They even have something for the front pump. I don't do the rebuilds. I have a transmission shop around the corner from me, and I just hand them over to him, and he does them for me. He does a great job. But they also sell the torque converter, and it's a 2200 stall speed with a lockup feature, and so it's still a lockup torque converter. Let's see, William, any thoughts on water line removal to carb plenum? Warm weather usage only in Florida. Good question, William. Let me tell you a story. Oh my gosh. Hopefully we're not here for 2 hours. I'll try to keep it quick. Customer brought me a car. I already knew the car because a friend of mine owned it and sold it to this customer. The car had a Phytech fuel injection unit already on it. I had sold the kit to, and it was installed by somebody else. That hose was taken off, and a lot of people want to take that hose off or have taken that hose off, which if it runs good for you, that's great. The problem I encountered was with the fuel injection and converting to E85, E85 being having 85% alcohol at the most. I had a tuning problem. I was showing a little bit unstable on the air fuel ratio at idle, but eventually it would kind of smooth out. Then the minute I would touch the throttle and just open up those throttle blades, it went stupid rich, like just flooded it with fuel. It started to stumble and fall on its face. It's blowing smoke out the exhaust. If he held it there or held it at a higher RPM, it cleared itself out and then ran fine. And I'm like, what is going on here? I data logged my butt off on that thing, going, where is the problem? What sensor is telling it to dump that much fuel with the fuel injection? Come to find out, the fuel injection was not dumping any fuel. The injectors they weren't even adding any more fuel. Come to find out, because that hose was removed, the plenum was so cold, and I was trying to tune this in 40-degree weather here in Wisconsin, I was actually puddling ethanol in the plenum. And when I would just crack the throttle, the rush of air coming in carried that ethanol into the turbo, into the engine, and just flooded the motor until it burned it all up, and then it finally cleared up. So I added the hose back on. And when I added the hose back on and put a little bit of heat into that plenum, all of a sudden that all went away. And it idled beautifully. It accelerated fine. No more flooding, no more stumbling or anything like that. Now, again, cold weather, I understand. E85, all that alcohol, it needs a little bit of heat to get it to evaporate. So gasoline might be a little bit different. The thing to note here, though, is that hose is not flowing coolant when the thermostat opens. That hose is only flowing coolant and warming up that base of that plenum when the thermostat is closed. So during warm-up is the only time it's flowing. The minute that thermostat opens, it blocks off the passage, and there is no coolant flow going to the plenum anymore. So I say run it if you have it. Just run it. But being in Florida, it may work differently for you. I know you guys got a lot of hot temps and humidity and stuff like that. Maybe if you want to run it without and it's already off and it's working well for you, go with it. But great question. Let's see, where'd we leave off? Paul Johnson. Barry wants to know if if you've ever modified a turbo formula. No. Honestly, not yet. Not yet. I do have a guy who contacted me this past fall who has a black turbo formula. He's probably about 30 minutes from me. He just bought it. I'm not modifying anything on it. He does want me to look at it, make sure he can get it, running properly and stuff. He wants some other stuff done. He doesn't have the rally shifter, the little slapstick shifter. He bought one. He wants me to put that in it, and then check some other things out on it. I believe it's an 81. It's an 81 turbo formula hardtop. But so maybe soon. I think Barry's looking for one, isn't he? What's the largest TTA collection you've seen? Ooh, like real ones? Because I got a pretty good model car collection if you have turbo Trans-Ams. Yeah, it would have to probably be. I think Barry's probably got the most. I think. I don't know. Nobody's ever come to me and said how many they have. I've had people that said they've had multiples. I think one guy I talked to maybe had 5. I can't think of where he was from. He might have been in Florida. Rick owns 3. Well, there you go. I own 1, and it's too many. William, thanks for doing this for all of us. TTA line been off since 82 when I chromed or polished everything. Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw pictures of yours today, Will. That's a sharp car, 80 black and gold SE with the polished components under the hood and the added stuff. Oh, Barry has 7. Barry Johnson has 7 turbo Trans-Ams. I could almost name all 7 of them probably. He's got a silver gray 81. He's got an 80. Well, he's got my old 80 pace car. I think he's got an 81 Daytona 500 car. Then he's got the 2 Macho turbos, which I did number 4. He's got number 6 that's going to come to me at some point. I'm trying to think what other ones he might have. Or maybe I don't know where they all are. I'm sure at some point I will. Oh, this person here, F649. He has 5 Trans-Ams, 4 of them are turbos. Speaking of turbos, real quick, we'll probably end it on this one. I know it's getting late. Been at it this almost an hour and a half. On eBay, there was, probably still is, a 76 Trans-Am 400 automatic car that somebody sent to me. Actually, I think Barry and Bruce Johnson sent it to me. It's white, got honeycomb wheels. It's a 400 with a turbo, and it's not the HO Racing Turbo Force kit. I've never seen this. I don't know if it's a kit. I don't know if somebody custom made something. It looks like something out of the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Maybe adapted from the Excel Turbosonic Martin turbo kit for the small block Chevy. If you ever get a chance to, try to look up one of those ones. That's an interesting deal. So it's a draw-through turbo. It still has the shaker hood. The turbo is mounted on the driver's side over like kind of by the battery area. And there's a tube coming into the inlet of the compressor housing. And that tube is coming from under the carburetor on the intake, under the air cleaner, goes into the turbo. And then there's a tube coming out of the discharge out of the compressor housing, going back underneath onto the intake manifold. So if you look there, Turbosonic and Excel made this turbo kit back in the late 70s, early 80s, and it had this like weird plenum deal that went under the carburetor that air intake came in from the bottom. It was like divided. So the top half was your air intake, but the bottom half was goose pressure. And I think that's what they used and adapted it. But it's a Pontiac engine, and it's kind of an interesting deal. I was like, wow. And looked like a pretty good sized turbo on it too. I wonder if they actually plumbed all the exhaust from both sides of the engine, because that Martin kit for the small block Chevys from back in the day had a single turbo on one side. So only the passenger side set of cylinders were feeding the turbo. It was a weird deal. The driver's side was actually, I believe, naturally aspirated. It was just exhausting out, unless it had a crossover pipe, but I don't think it did. But anyway, Lee, the Macho had 323 gears, correct? If you're talking about the Macho Turbo, no, it did not. Not saying that they couldn't install those for you, but Macho number 4 that I had here, Macho Turbo number 4, let me be specific, to 80, it had 308s in it. We switched it to 323s. Barry had me put 323s in it. Andy Wright, what did they modify on the Macho turbo cars? Good question. Nothing. Well, I've only had the one Macho turbo car here. It was Macho number 4. Rumor is that they built 6 of them. I think that's how many there are. I don't know what the other ones had as far as modifications, but I do know that Macho Turbo number 4 came here and it was stone stock. 308 gears, timing wasn't modified, carb was all stock, turbo was all stock, exhaust was, well, as far as we know, the exhaust was changed at some point in its life. So as far as I can tell, nothing was changed on it other than lowering the front end, cutting the front springs, and the different paint scheme that it had, the two-tone paint scheme and decals. But all right, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up for live number 5. And I appreciate everybody being here. So here's to a good and prosperous 2021. Hopefully I get to see you guys out there at the shows this year. And y'all take care. Be sure to check out the videos coming up for with Rocky, and I'm sure I'll be out there, with my car going to the drag strip and probably doing more dyno stuff with it. But really appreciate it. Really appreciate you guys. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.